Hey everybody, thanks for joining challenge number 1 from the C2 Pipeline Innovation and Curiosity Center. If you don't know me, I'm Michaela. I've worked for C2 Pipeline for 3 years and I'm also a student at Wayne State University studying computer science and math. So a little bit before we get into the challenge about how this is going to work, I'm going to give you a challenge prompt in a few seconds, and if you're an experienced coder or you've had some experience in writing programming languages, then you might want to pause and try to solve the problem on your own. But if not, then I'm going to go through the problem step by step so you can work to solve the problem and learn how to code with me. Today we're going to be coding in C++, and if you don't have a compiler on your computer, we're going to go through that in the video as well. So I guess let's get into it. Alright, here's the challenge. So the challenge is to create a Mad Libs program. The program should include multiple data types. This includes integers, strings, and doubles. It should also include the use of cin and cout. So this means you're going to be inputting information from the user and also sending information out to the user. When the program is finished, you should prompt the user for all the input values. So this is all the different words and stuff that you would put into the story. And then you're going to return the full story back to the user. So that being said, you can either pause here and try to solve this on your own, or you can hang tight and we can solve it together. Okay, so our first task is going to be finding a compiler. For those of you who are already coded maybe and have compilers on your computer, Visual Studios works really well, IntelliJ works really well. But if you don't have those installed on your computer, we can just go ahead and use a free online compiler called OnlineGDB. For C++. This one I find works really well for quick projects like the one we're going to be doing today. So if you go to Google and type in online GDB compiler for C++, it should be the first thing that pops up. So when you go ahead and click on that, it should bring you to this launch screen. Okay, so now that we have our compiler all up and running, let's first talk about comments and headers. So this right here is called a header. And it's basically just a block of comments that tell the user what the program does, who wrote it, when it was written, all that kind of cool stuff. So you can actually go ahead and delete all this, and you write a comment by writing 2 backslashes, and then you can write your name and what the program does, or even the date. So today is the 24th. Whatever you want to do to make your program known to whoever's reading it. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the library. So this is the library that controls cin, cout, and what that does is it sends information to the user and it takes information from the user. So we're going to need that, so we're not going to touch that. But what we are going to do is we're actually going to include another library, string. So string holds sentences and words, so we're going to need that for this program. The next thing is the namespace, so we're going to leave this alone. So this is just telling us that we're using the standard namespace. Moving on to main. So main is a function in which everything is printed out to the user. So right now this cout is telling us content is going out and it's printing hello world. So then when we go up here to debug our program by hitting run, we'll see it compile. And when it finally compiles, it'll show you down here. So now that we got the compiler set up, we have to find our Mad Libs that we're going to be using. So you can either Google image search it, you can go to madlibs.com, or you can write your own. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to search Mad Libs images. So that's going to pull up a ton of different options. So when you're searching for this, depending on how long you want your program to be, you're going to look at the number of spaces that you have to fill in. So for this one, it looks like there's not too many of them, and there's different types of things that you're putting into it. So this one takes strings and numbers, so that's going to be 2 different data types that you're going to be using. So let's go with this one and head back to our compiler. So now the first thing you're going to want to do is remove this cout. So that's just going to get rid of that original content that we ran in the original program. So now the first thing you're going to want to do is look at your Mad Libs that you chose and look at the first spot that you have to fill in. Now mine happens to be an adjective, so we know that that's going to be a word. So if you have a word or a sentence that you need to input, you're going to use the string data type. So when you type string, that compiler is going to recognize the variable as a word or a sentence. So now you just need to name it. So I'm just going to name this adjective 1. And then of course it's followed by a semicolon. Now you continue on throughout the whole thing. So my next thing would be another string. So I can put this as nationality just to keep track of it. So you're going to again put the keyword string and then follow it by nationality. And then you move forward throughout the entire thing. Now when I get down to the bottom of mine, there's a number. So you have two options for a number. You can either choose a decimal or a whole number. So if you're going the decimal route, you're going to want to choose a double. But if you're going an integer or a whole number route, you're going to want to choose an integer. So for mine, I'm just going to choose an integer, and you can specify that to the user. So when you type that in, it's going to be int and then num1. Now remember that this whatever you want to call it, the name of the variable, can be anything you want. So I'm just going to call it num1 and then of course followed by a semicolon. Now you continue this until you finish all the variable fields in the Mad Libs. Okay, so now you should have all your different variables input into the compiler. So now what we have to do is we have to read in those variables for their data. So to do this, you have to prompt the user first so they know what they're entering data for. So we're going to use the keyword cout, so this means content out, and we're going to use this token right here. So that just tells the compiler that it's going to be followed by a message, and then we're going to use the double quotations, and then our first thing we're going to input is an adjective. So we're going to ask the user, please enter an adjective. And then that's going to be followed by an end line. So that just acts like an enter key, so it's going to return to the next line. And then we're going to use the cin, which stands for content in. And then we're going to write the name of the variable that we're reading into. So in this case, it's going to be adjective number 1. So then we're going to write that right down here, followed by a semicolon, of course. So now that that variable is taken care of, we're going to move down to the next one. So this is reading in the second variable. So again, we're going to content out, and then we're going to scroll up, and we see we have nationality. So we're going to, again, use double quotations, and we're going to write, please enter a nationality, and then of course followed by the token, and then end line. So now we can go down here, and again, cin, using make sure it's the opposite way as your content out, and then we're going to read in this variable name. And you're going to continue doing this all the way down to your last variable. So we're going to go ahead and pause here while you finish that. Okay, so now that all of our variables have been read into, which means our data that the user inputted are going to be stored in these variables that we declared up here, we can go ahead and think about what the next step in the process is for Mad Libs. So once we ask the user all the information for the story, we want to then read the story back to them. So that's going to be our next step in the Mad Libs. So to do this, we're going to now, we're going to now take the first words from the document and print them out to the user. So in my story, the first words are pizza was invented by. So we have to use cout, which is character out, and we follow by our token, and then we're going to use double quotations and then type in that first sentence. So now one thing I will tell you is that we have to be careful of our spacing. So make sure that you enter a space after you finish any sentence, because this is actually a character to the compiler. So it's gonna, if you don't put it there, it won't print a space in between your sentence that you're typing and then your variable. So now we have to follow that by a token, and this strategy that we're using right here is called concatenation. So we're putting two different things together, and so right now pizza was invented by, and then we get to that space in our story, and that is where we put our adjective number 1, I believe. So this first variable that we declared, so we want to print that one out. So then we're just going to write adjective 1, and then that's followed by, again, this token, and then we're going to continue on with our story. Now in mine, it moves on to the nationality right after. But let's think about this. So if we want two words right next to each other, we have to account for that space. So before we can put the next variable, we have to account for that space. Now we can follow it by another token, and then we can write our variable that is nationality. So you're going to continue doing this until you get to the end of your story, alternating between sentences, characters, your spaces, and then of course your variables that you input. Okay, so now you should have all of your story types out with your variables input into it. This is what mine looks like if you were following along with me. If you weren't, it should look similar to this. My advice to you is just to make sure to have this last token followed by an end line at the end of yours, just to make sure you don't get any compile errors. If you are getting some compile errors when you hit run up here, I would check your return statement. Make sure you have that return 0, because that's going to tell the compiler the end of your program. Make sure after every end line and your variable declarations here that you have semicolons. Just check all your semicolons really. And then finally up here, make sure that you have these curly braces in the right spot. So this is going to let the compiler know where your main starts. So it should start with a curly brace right after main, and then it should close with a curly brace right after your return statement. Once you check those, you shouldn't be getting any compiler errors. And then when you run your program, so you hit run up here, and it should compile right where the other one compiled at the beginning. And it should ask you to enter your first, whatever your first variable was. So mine happened to be an adjective, and that's what it's asking me for. So we know we're good here. It'll run through all of your entering variable stages, and then finally it'll take those variables and output them with this message. Congratulations on finishing your first coding challenge. As always, if you need a little bit extra help, the full answer key has been posted on the C2 Pipeline Innovation and Curiosity Center website. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on all the challenges that I'll be posting throughout the summer. Thanks again for watching. This has been Michaela with the C2 Pipeline Innovation and Curiosity Center.